Hey everybody, welcome to episode 9 of Cougar Dash. I'm Cody Schoeler here with my co-host, as always, Ryan Root, here to talk about everything Cougar football. And Ryan, we're going to start it off with a little bit of a sad topic. This is when we would cue the somber violin music and the sad songs because Skyler Thomas, he left. We almost went through this before. He entered, he came back. He was doing a little willy won't he, and he finally did. He's in the transfer portal, and so this opens up some opportunities in the secondary. So I want to ask you, we're focusing on some spicy takes this episode. Who's stepping up in the secondary now that we've lost that veteran guy?
Well, first I'll say it was definitely surprising to see this news. I was out to dinner with my roommates, and my roommate says, "Oh, did you know that Skyler Thomas went to the transfer portal?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but he's back." And he's like, "No, he's not."
Yeah, it's old news.
I said, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" He said, "It happened today." Well, I do think it's a big loss, but the way that we can kind of bounce back from this is look at the corners that we have now. And I know that we have some good corners with Tyree Ross and well, we had Skyler Thomas. I was just about to say his name, dang it.
It still hasn't fully set in.
Yeah. I think the corner that's got to step up is Khalid Jabril, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who had the only recorded interception for the Cougars during the scrimmage on Saturday, which we'll get more into the scrimmage, of course. But only picked throughout the whole scrimmage. That says a lot considering he only played special teams his first 2 seasons at WSU. So I think Jabril is kind of first on that list of now you're kind of, we can take all the upperclassmen and move them up a spot as Skyler Thomas goes wherever, and then put Jabril right up there with them.
Yeah, he's one of the guys I wrote about. I covered this topic for a column for Sports Pac-12 because looking at last year's roster, he's one of the only guys that was listed as a nickel. Skyler Thomas really was going to key in that nickel role, so I think that's where we're looking to replace a guy. So I think he's definitely a guy that has that opportunity. But the guy I think, and from what I've heard so far, that has really taken that over is Armani Marsh. I believe he's a redshirt junior, and he's been kind of the guy they've said that has taken over that role. He has experience in that role. He played it last year. Obviously, this is a new team and a new system, but the defensive staff has reiterated that they're going to use the nickel package. It's going to be a big part of this defense. So I think, we can rely on that type of experience. He was in that role. I think he played 2 times last year, started at that position. So, he has some on the field experience, which can give him a little bit of a leg up with all these young guys. He got 24 tackles last year, which isn't crazy, but it was 12th on the team. He played in a very limited role. So, he's shown that on the field. And I think I think I would put my money on him to be the guy that takes over that role and replaces that kind of Skyler Thomas position because he has a similar build to him. He kind of fits in that role. He's about 5'10", 170, 180. So I think he fits in that position really well.
And like I said, with the veteran presence, that's something that Jabril can definitely pass down to these freshman corners coming in, especially Shaw Smith for sure. It seems Shaw Smith is kind of one of our freshman secret weapons that we have on the team this year. And if we can have Jabril, or like you said, sorry, what was his name again? I'm still stuck on Skyler Thomas.
Armani Marsh.
Armani Marsh, yes. Or Armani Marsh, yes. Okay.
Get used to it.
I hope so. I hope this needs to be the year that we can not look away when our defense hits the field, and we can actually watch a full football game and not feel worried. But it just comes back to providing for these freshman corners and making sure that they can get accustomed to the new defense, because although these guys are veterans, it's a new defense. They got to get used to the system too. And since Jabril is kind of he's a redshirt sophomore, so if he sticks with the Cougars for the rest of his career, he can pass down sort of that expertise to the incoming freshman year in year.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Jabril. He is absolutely just jacked. He's huge. There's some pictures that have been posted with him flexing his biceps, and those are massive. So I think he definitely has a role, especially in that run game. There's actually another player I kind of want to talk about. I'm a little bit of cheating on this topic because there's a second guy I want to bring up, because Skyler Thomas, he played nickel, but he also had played some safety in the past. So I think now that opens up the safety position. And, as a guy that you kind of mentioned earlier, I really like Tyree Ross to kind of take over at that position. He is probably the hardest hitter on this team. If you watch his highlight video, he has this one hit on special teams where he absolutely just destroys some poor kick returner. And I think I've kind of found a type when I'm looking at some of these young guys that are coming up, and it's just guys that just play all over the field with crazy speed, get their name out there on special teams, like Travion Brown that I mentioned a few weeks ago. So, I like Tyree Ross to come in at safety. I think he can slot in there. Safety is not as competitive a position as corner. We have a lot of corners on this roster, 3 seeming to play. So I think that position is a lot more open. And, I like Ross. I'm curious to know what you think about him and maybe about that second safety position, because I think Daniel Isom has one of those kind of spots locked down.
Well, you got to have at least one hard-hitting safety on any football team, right? Seahawks wouldn't have won a Super Bowl without Cam Chancellor, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So having a hard-hitting safety like that is definitely vital to any defense, and I definitely think he can provide in that sector. And safety is incredibly important to a secondary. It's one thing to defend a receiver cutting in field on a slant or an in route, but if you badly time a read on a deep route, that's 6 points up on the board before you even know it. So we definitely need some smart players playing that position. And I'm not saying none of these players are not able to play that position. They wouldn't be at WSU if they weren't able to. But we definitely need to make sure that they understand the coverage to a T with this new defensive coordinator, which probably can be tough for some teams to take in a new defense and learn all of the patterns and all of the coverage maps and everything like that. That's going to be vital for that position on top of the hard hitting, because it's one thing to spread some of the tackles around, I think it was a defensive coordinator that said Jihad Woods doesn't have to get 150 tackles this year. We're actually going to spread out some of the impact. So we can spread out some of the the run stopping or tackling, if you will, but definitely the pass coverage I think definitely needs to be atoned to as well.
And I think these positions are similar to kind of the way we've talked about, the quarterback position and some of the other positions on this team that are up for grabs, being that these aren't going to be decided on November 7th, set in stone. We're going to see guys rotate in, which already happens on defense, fairly frequently, but we're going to see guys, getting their chance at these positions. We're going to see Marsh, and we're going to see Jabril, and we're going to see some other guys at that nickel. We're going to see, some guys tested out there that have played outside. We're going to see Tyree Ross. We're probably going to see Phillip Powell, at that safety position. So, because we all know in this weird offseason, it's hard to declare a starter with a month of practice and 2 scrimmages. So those games are going to be huge. I'm not saying that whoever I think is going to win the job is going to get every single rep at that position, because I think, these are going to be positions that are won. These positions especially are going to be won in games, because if you show you can make plays, then, you're not going to be on the sideline. You're going to be on the field. They're going to get their 11 best guys on the field. So whoever's out there making plays, whether it's Tyree Ross, whether it's Armani Marsh, whether it's Khalid Jabril, I think that's who we're going to see get a bigger role going forward.
Yeah, and they, like you said, they earn the position while they play in the game. I think that kind of relates a lot to the quarterbacks, which we found out a lot, of information with the quarterback competition on Saturday with the scrimmage. I'm kind of jumping the gun going to the second topic here, Cody, but how about you tell me, I'll ask you, what are your initial thoughts of what we found out from the quarterback competition this Saturday?
Well, actually, before I get into my take, I wanted to, offer you something. Might be the most generous thing a Dash Sports host has done and will ever do, because I believe,
I think I know where this is going, but okay.
Because I believe we speculated about this before we even knew where the season was going. If we were going to have a season, we made our picks for who the starting quarterback was going to be. And if I remember correctly, you picked Gunnar Cruz, And not only did you pick him, but you picked him very passionately and very emphatically. And, if we're looking at what's been done in the scrimmage and we're looking at the way the coaches are talking about these guys, I'm going to give you the chance to retract that statement, to take it back, admit that you were wrong. I don't know if de Laura is going to be the starter. That's who I picked, but I think I beat you on this. So I'm giving you the chance. It's very nice of me. I don't know how many other people would do that, but so I would like you to go first. And, if you take me up on this offer.
You'll get half an apology, okay? Yeah, I definitely Gunnar Cruz did not score during the scrimmage, which is a could have been where he could have turned the ball over. I'll say that. He didn't turn the ball over. He had less incompletions than de Laura or Cam, and I'm not sure who had, if I remember. I remember the scoring stats. That's I think what's most important about the scrimmage on Saturday. But yeah, I was a little wrong about Gunnar, and from the looks of it, from Brian Smith's presser, it looks like Cameron and Jaden are taking the majority of this conversation. I think Gunnar is, he may have a better chance next year, depending on how things go. But it looks like it's Cameron versus de Laura. And feel free to put in the chat who you think should take this position, because I still think it's kind of a toss-up. I mean, I will say de Laura is definitely one of those quarterbacks that can extend plays and make plays happen. The fact that he had 2 total touchdowns, not just 2 passing touchdowns, but he had a rushing touchdown. And that's something that's really going to be relevant to this run and shoot offense if you know anything about Cole McDonald in Hawaii last year. So having a athletic quarterback that can extend plays is definitely going to be vital to this offense. However, Cameron also has that veteran presence on the field that you can't really deny. So it's a little tough because Jaden definitely seemed to have the better game. I think that's pretty, like, no debate there. But having that veteran presence out there, or having a 19-year-old, 18-year-old kid out there, that's still kind of in the air. But I'll say, yeah, Jaden balled out on Saturday.
Yeah, I think, looking at those numbers, which I have right here, so I'll give them to the people that are listening, that are watching. Cameron Cooper went 9 for 15, 147 yards, 1 interception, 1 touchdown. Jaden de Laura went 10 for 14, 133 yards, 1 touchdown, and a rushing touchdown. And then Cruz went 11 for 18 for 69 yards. So yeah, I mean, I think Cooper and de Laura are obviously very similar with those stat lines. I'm not going to do too much nitpicking. They both were really close. Cooper threw an interception, but from everything I've heard just about quarterbacks in general, guys who throw interceptions in practice, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it means they're testing it out. They're seeing what they can do. They're not just throwing checkdowns. So I'm not going to put too much stake into that interception. And we're kind of declaring this a 2-man race. Obviously, the coaching staff hasn't said anything yet. They still are saying it's a 3-man race. They still mention walk-on freshman Victor Gabalis in there as well. He never really had the biggest shot. But one of the things I noticed, I'm reading, super between the lines, like going super meta on this, is that at the start of camp, whenever we asked about the quarterbacks, or whenever Rolo talked about the quarterbacks, it was always Cooper, Cruz, and then de Laura. That was the order they were kind of addressed, and that's based on their age and their status. But the other day, Rolo first of all didn't even mention Cruz after the scrimmage. I think that was a big thing. And then when offensive coordinator Brian Smith talked about him, he mentioned Cooper and then de Laura and then Cruz. So, reading into that, I think, they're tipping their hand a little bit without.
There's exactly a little psychology to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Rolovich has talked about psychological warfare a lot. So I think he's trying to pull one over on us with that. But yeah, I mean, looking at what these guys have been able to do, I personally still like de Laura. I know Cam and Cooper is kind of looking like the front runner, but de Laura has experience in this system, not the exact same one, but he ran this in high school, and a system that can be very difficult to learn. I think that gives you a leg up. And yes, Cam Cooper has veteran experience being in college on this team for 2 years, but he's never started, he's never played. So I don't think the veteran experience is a huge advantage for him. I think it gives him maybe some leadership status and some like, help in that regard. But I'm not looking at him as a redshirt sophomore and giving him a huge leg up just because he's been here for 2 years. I'm also not discounting him because he hasn't played, because he's been behind some great players. But, I think this race is super tight, but I do think it's down to 2 players.
Well, I want to go back to that Brian Smith presser because I know, and I have it written down here. I nitpicked 2 like one-word descriptions of Cammon and DeLora here, or I'll throw Gunner in there as well. So I heard him use explosive for Jaden DeLora, which if there's anything you want from a quarterback is maybe a leader or a conductor of the offense, but explosive sounds great too. Lamar Jackson is explosive. He's very explosive. Kyler Murray is explosive. So having an explosive quarterback to expand this offense is definitely something that I think fans should consider when picking, their front runner for the quarterback for the Cougars. But then Cammon, like I said, it's that word veteran. He's been here. He's been sitting on the bench. He's been behind Minshew and Falk and Gordon. He's observed college quarterbacks, much like Gunner did last year, but Cammon observed quarterbacks that have broken records, have played in the NFL. And, there's also with being a veteran. And then with Gunner, I see leader, which I know I brought that up in our debate as well, is that Gunner is definitely a great sideline presence. And I noticed that a lot last year from, it's something to notice a bench player for pumping up their team. I think is kind of funny. But the way I see it's like Jaden had the better game. Gunner has, kind of that leadership presence that Brian Smith brought up.
You're really not giving up on Gunner, are you?
No, I'm putting. I started the whole thing out giving props to your boy. Okay, what I'm saying here is Jaden had the better game. Gunner had the leadership. Cammon had a little bit of both.
Yeah,
that's what I think is pushing him forward in this race. Props off to Jaden. He had a great game, and another thing that I see from Cammon's stats compared to Gunner. So Gunner, he had 11 completions and threw for under 100 yards, right?
For 69 yards, so under
for 69 yards. So 6 yards a pass on average. So and Cammon had 9 completions for 147 yards. That to me shows that Cammon really is going through all of his reads. He really is looking downfield, and he's not, and I didn't watch the game, front to end, but that just seeing those stats of Gunner having over 10 completions but not having 100 yards total for passing just shows to me that he is hitting those checkdowns. He is hitting those flats and those ins, maybe a little bit too much. Cammon looks like he's aiming downfield. He looks like he's actually is going through all of his reads. And it's not perfect so far, as we see with the one and only interception. And Jaden, it's just a real mixture of things. With Jaden had the better game, whether it be, I don't think it was beginner's luck. I honestly do think he played a great game.
No, I agree.
And Cammon has, the veteran mentality and can go through the reads, but I still think Cammon is the front runner for this, at least for right now. And I hope we can find out soon, because that's definitely going to give us a better idea of what the season's going to look like.
So you're taking your flag from Gunner Cruz and you're planting it on Cammon Cooper now? Are you making it
for
official?
Right now, I will say yes. For my revised starting quarterback prediction, I will put Cammon Cooper in first. Sorry, Gunner. I love you. You're a great presence on the sideline. Just be a great presence again this year, and we'll see about next year. Anthony Gordon didn't play his first year. He sat on the sideline.
It's true.
He broke a lot of records too. So yes, I'm officially changing my prediction. I'm going Cammon. I'm locking it in. How about you?
All right. Well, I'm staying with mine. I'm gonna stay on Jaden DeLora, and I would like to preemptively congratulate myself for being right, because if you take whatever curse or jinx you put on Gunner Cruz and you bring it over to Cammon Cooper, then I think
don't call it a jinx, man. Don't call it a jinx.
I'm just saying, you're 0 for 1 already, and I don't know if that's going to change. I like DeLora. I think the rushing obviously is a huge thing. They're both very similar, so we're going to have to wait and see. And I do want to add for these guys, I don't remember who it was, but there was a long touchdown pass to a receiver that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And I don't know who it was. So if that was Cooper, then that inflates his yards a little bit because there's a lot of run after the catch. But yeah, I think it's super close. And I think, the next scrimmage we're going to see, the coaches haven't committed to doing anything. And I think one last point about this is that these guys all got reps with the ones, with the twos. They were all spread out pretty equally, at least from what they said. So it wasn't like Cruz was throwing to different receivers. They all had seemingly the same options and seemingly going against the same defense. So I think, we'll revisit this in a few weeks, hopefully when a starter's named, and I will give you another chance to take it back and to admit that I'm right. But we're going to go into.
I'll get our game prediction right against Oregon State. That's the one prediction I'll get right.
Yeah.
We'll clown on them.
Whoever it is going to start off with a win, so that'll be nice for whoever gets that job. So we're gonna go to one last hot take. I'm gonna call it. We're gonna both spit out a hot take. We did these separately without conspiring together at all, but they both ended up being very similar. So I'm gonna let you go first, and then I'll tell you why you're wrong.
All right, then. So if there's anything that Cougar fans know recently, if they've been keeping up with the pressers and the practices and scrimmages, Joey Herbert's been balling. True freshman out of California has been absolutely tearing it up, and he's impressing the coaches straight out of the gate with a new offense. I mean, props to Travell Harris, Renard Bell, Calvin Jackson Jr., all the veteran receivers on the team. They have their spot, they have their presence. There's no debating that. But Herbert is quickly becoming a part of the conversation for being one of the most entertaining receivers to watch on this team. And I have a bold prediction. I think he has a great chance of leading the Cougs in receiving yards this season. I didn't say touchdowns. I didn't say total receiving. I just meant receiving yards. I got a couple reasons why, but I'll start off by saying he's outstanding after the catch. I've seen some of his highlights where he'll turn a simple out route or a simple flat into a 30-yard gain downfield. He stops on a dime. He makes defenders just sit there and stare at him because they don't know where he's going to go. Herbert reminds me a lot, and let me finish the comparison before you flip out here. Reminds me a lot about Odell Beckham. We all know Odell Beckham's a deep threat, okay? He had the catch. He's fine and dandy as far as deep threats go. But Odell Beckham is outstanding after the catch as well. He can stop on a dime and cut and turn a 6-yard pass into a 35-yard gain. That to me is what I think is going to push Herbert above the rest of the receivers in terms of receiving yards. I still think, for touchdowns, I think Renard Bell and I think Calvin Jackson Jr. and other Jamal Calvin, I think they'll get in the end zone a little bit more. But Herbert had the only 2 receiving touchdowns in the scrimmage. And whether that be a additional rep thing or whatever, over 100 yards receiving and 2 receiving touchdowns as a true freshman, that's pretty impressive, I would say. And both touchdowns coming from either quarterback, Cooper and Schoeler.
Yeah. I agree that Herbert is great. I remember the start of camp, his name started coming up, and I was buying it like, oh yeah, he's a good freshman, but I thought he was just going to be a good freshman. He's looking great in practice, but he's just a freshman. But we're over a weekend, and like I'm fully sipping the Joey Herbert Kool-Aid. Like I'm buying Joey Herbert stock because I think he's going to be really good. Like I think this is a guy who's going to contribute now. But the problem I have with him leading the team in receiving yards is that he's got to compete with Renard Bell and Travell Harris, who, when we pick breakout players, you pick Renard Bell. Like he's a good player. He's going to step up. So I think that's where it's going to get a little hard because he's a true freshman that's going to have to, compete against these guys who have been here for 2 or 3 years. So I think, he may not get the opportunity. But my guy, who I'm also picking to lead the team in receiving yards, funny enough, so we're going to go add on this, is Jamal Calvin. And the reason why I think this is, I embrace the hot take part of it is because he didn't even play last year. He was out with an injury all of last year. And while Travell Harris and Renard Bell stepped up and, a handful of other guys, people have kind of forgot about Jamal Calvin. He's back, he's healthy. And where he did play the slot, he's now, transitioning to playing outside, which, shows his talent that, he's the one that was able to do that. This guy was a great recruit. He's one of the better recruits that WSU has gotten. And we talk about the shiftiness and the being able to make guys miss. There might not be a better guy on this team at that than Jamal Calvin. And so being able to put that outside is going to be huge. His career, he's got 75 catches for 797 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's in 2 seasons. I think he surpasses his career yardage total this year. The catches we'll see. I think they're going to be spread around, but and another guy, if we've looked at what Rolovich has done in the past, John Ursua, who was a great receiver for him. I mean, they're the same height, 5'10". They're about the same weight, 160. So Rolovich does not have a problem making, a smaller guy the focal point of his offense. And I think the fact that, Jamal Calvin is moving to the outside shows that he's the guy that this team is going to really rely on. And I think, he's going to make some big plays, like an Aesop Winston did, 89 yards down the sideline. So I think Jamal Calvin's going to have the most yards at the end of this season.
So what is Jameer's frame like? How tall is he?
I think he's 5'10".
Okay. Like a little less than 200 pounds, something like that?
I think it was like 160, 170.
Okay, so Herbert and Calvin have pretty similar frame, like almost to a T, as far as what I've seen on WSU Athletics page. That frame is very similar to a receiver that Rolovich coached this last year, JoJo Ward from Hawaii. He was a senior receiver from Hawaii. JoJo Ward was one of 3 receivers on that team to have 1,000 yards receiving, which is already wild as it is. We only had one, being the number 1 passing offense in the nation. But he was one of 3 receivers with 1,000+ yards. They're both very similar type. They both are deep threats. There's no question about that. Herbert can definitely go up and grab it. He played corner in high school as well. But he also was a kick returner in high school. He's shifty. He knows how to read where defenders are going, and he can find his way to the end zone. But him and JoJo are very similar in their frame, their style of play, and 1,000 yards receiving this last year. Granted, he was a senior. 1,000 yards receiving is, I think, a pretty good comparison for Herbert to succeed in his first year. But it just comes back to the shiftiness. I will say Jamal Calvin definitely follows that theme as well. And I think Jameer can be a deep threat for this team. But if there's anything that we've seen from the scrimmage so far is, other than the 2 touchdowns that Herbert obviously got, but that was a short pass turned into a long run to the end zone. And I think that's going to be a pretty impactful part of our offense, is having that yards after catch weapon that can take some of these teams down.
Yeah, and going back to the stats of those Hawaii receivers and comparing them to WSU, the reason WSU only had the 1,000-yard receivers because they were rotating receivers in and out, going 8 deep. Everybody was getting catches, whereas Hawaii, they stuck more with 4 guys, a set amount of guys, and I think that's something we're going to see here with Rolovich kind of sticking to a core group of guys. I think Joey Herbert's going to get his way into that, but I don't think he's going to be one of those 4 guys, whereas I think Jamal Calvin is. So I think that's where we're going to see, him get those yards. We will see. I think, we can revisit this at the end of the season, but I think Jamal Calvin's going to have at least more yards than Joey Herbert. I'm very confident in that.
I hope we get 4,000-yard receivers. I hope we get 5,000-yard receivers.
That would be
great. I hope we
great.
score 70 passing touchdowns this year over 7 games. I want 10 touchdowns a game.
I would love that. All right. But, so we're running out of time here. Thanks for tuning in and watching. You can find our written content exclusively at sportspac12.com, and make sure to follow them on Twitter at sportspac12. You can find links to that written content. I always say content on our website, dashsports.tv, and you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at dashsportstv. Lastly, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Dash Sports, where you can find all of our shows and clips. Thanks for tuning in. See you at the same time next week.